In our last video, we were looking at the east side of 7th Street, and now let's start on the west side. This is the southwest corner of 7th and Water Street. Not much here anymore. We're right back to parking lots again. But at one time, on this parking lot area, was a hotel, and it was called the Metropole Hotel. From an article that was in the booklet Porture in 1900, it says this about the hotel. The Metropole at 702 to 704 Lapeer Avenue, corner of 7th Street, is one of the finest places in the city. Over $15,000 in improvements have been spent on it in the past year. The exterior presents a magnificent view. The interior has been elegantly remodeled. A beautiful steel ceiling dotted with electric lights, noiseless ceiling electric fans, handsome finished walls, and elegant furniture are some of the improvements that help to beautify Huron's place. A pretty wine room is located in the front of the saloon. It is appropriately furnished and has the usual requirements of a high-class wine room. The whole place is heated by a steam heating apparatus. And taking it all in, Mr. O'Hearn has a place to be proud of. Joseph Beckton had taken charge of the Metropole bowling alleys this winter and is going to boom that end of the business. These are claimed by experts to be the finest bowling alleys in the state. They were made by the Indianapolis Bowling Company and are considered to be their best. Bowling is considered to be a healthful exercise, and with a popular fellow like Joe behind the business, it will certainly hum. The thing that amazed me about this photograph is that there's no signage at all for the Metropole Hotel. But there is some bold signage for the Standard Novelty Company, which was located on the 3rd floor of the hotel. This wasn't a novelty company like the novelty companies you see today. They had a wide variety of things that they sold. You can see that they even advertised on their stationery. Here we see that there's boys' washable sailor suits and blouses. And that's something you wouldn't expect to see at a novelty store. Here's something else you wouldn't expect to see as well. A slot machine. Not like the ones you see today. These are the very early ones. Matter of fact, the Harrington Hotel had one just like this. And I would imagine that they bought it at Standard Novelty Company. I say that because Charles Harrington was the vice president of the company, and Henry McMorran was the president. I really don't believe the hotel was on that corner very long, because by 1907 they were on this corner. That would be the northeast corner of Huron Avenue and McMorran. They took over the New Pacific Hotel, which I assume went out of business. I don't know why they moved. That's one of the mysteries of the past, I guess. I know this place didn't have a bowling alley. It used to be the Greyhound bus station, as many of you will remember, and also the Edison Hotel at one time. As we zoom back out, we can see the Strand Theater, and this is where the brass rail is today. It appears to be the same building. If you look closely, you can see that middle building with the curved windows on the top. And on the photograph to the left, the next building to the left is the Strand Theater. On the one on the insert to the right, the one on the left of the building with the curved windows is the brass rail. So the windows lined up, it would appear to be the same building. After the Hotel Metropole moved, the Kobitz-Melcher's Brewery Company moved into that location. They weren't a brewery there. They didn't brew the beer there. The beer was brewed in Detroit. They were a distributor for the beer, and the owners were McGeorge Philpott Liquor Company, actually. You can see the signage on the wagon here, but you can also see some signage on the horse, KM, Kobitz-Melcher. The company had a pretty neat sales gimmick. You can see from this ad. These dishes are free, yours for the asking. They ornament the sideboard, beautify the table, add zest and pleasure to the meal, and they're all free. The set consists of 31 pieces, 6 dinner plates, 6 cups, 6 saucers, 6 dessert plates, 6 individual butters, and a meat platter. You get the set free with Pale Select, the quality beer for the home. And they go on to say 1 coupon is given with each case of beer, 2 dozen small bottles for $1. The dishes will be delivered as soon as you have saved 10 coupons. The only charge is for packing and transportation. Here's one of their bottles. I found this on eBay. You can see the name quite plainly on the side of the bottle. And as we zoom out here, we can see that this bottle has a stopper on it, which was kind of interesting because I thought, well, what kind of tops did they have back then? They didn't put a stopper in every one of these. I knew they didn't have screw-off caps, and I know they didn't have the flip-top caps that you took off with an opener. But what I found out in researching is that they had cork tops. Most of the early beer bottles had those tops, and I found this article here I thought was kind of interesting. This refers to another beer company who was about the same time period. And it says this about the cork bottles. The London brewer Whitebread began one of the earliest big bottling operations in 1870, but it still had to use cork bottles, which meant an army of workers to knock home the corks. Whitebread employed more than 100 corkers, each man working a 12-hour day. In 1886, every bottle had to be inserted into a leather boot held between the knees, and the cork knocked in with a flogger. Cork beer bottles were also inconvenient for the drinker. A corkscrew was required, and bottles could not be easily resealed. And guess what I found? A beer corkscrew with their logo on it. Very interesting, at least for me. This photograph was taken about 1930, and you can see in the foreground they were taking out the old swing bridge and putting in a new bridge. The large building on the corner that you see in the background, this is where the Hotel Metropole was, and of course the brewery company. But when this picture was taken, H.A. Smith was there. As we zoom in here, it's not very clear, but if you look closely, you can see that they're displaying their vegetables and fruits in baskets out in front of their store. I was very familiar with H.A. Smith. That's where we did our grocery shopping. We lived on Elk Street, and the closest one there was at Thomas Street Crossing. And as you can see from this list, H.A. Smith had 16 stores, not all in Port Huron. You can see at the bottom here they had St. Clair, Marine City, Algonac, Pearl Beach. But it was a very nice grocery store for the time period. Bigger than the mom and pop stores that were on the corner, but nothing like they have today. Something else I found interesting is that number 10 and number 11 were both on Lapeer Avenue within 5 blocks of each other, 700 to 1200. I thought pretty close for 2 stores, but they must have done all right. I'm not sure what year it was, but this building eventually burned down. I've had many businesses, smaller businesses on that corner over the years. I know at one time the fruit market was on that corner. Okay, as we go a bit further down 7th Street now, what do we have here? Another parking lot. Well, to the left of that parking lot, you see that red building. And then alongside that building, you see, looks like an alley almost, and it used to be an alley. But at one time, this is the location of Firehouse Number 1, which you see here. And as you look at this photograph of the firehouse, you can look to the left of that firehouse and you can see that alley that I've been talking about. I always thought that this was the most attractive firehouse in Port Huron. It's also the largest. It had 2 doors where all the other ones, I believe, had 1 door. And I like the design of this firehouse. As we zoom in here, we can see the large curved windows and the glass over the doors for the fire engines. And we see the decorative striping just above the windows. None of the other firehouses had that. And of course it had the tower to hang the hoses and also a lookout at the top, which I thought was also the most attractive tower of the group as well. When I was painting my small buildings of Port Huron, I made sure I used this photograph because in the windows they had little flower pots, and I made sure that they were on my building as well. You really can't see very well inside the firehouse, but you can see some things. You see those things that are hanging, look like from the ceiling? Well, they look like this if you were to look at them inside. The things hanging from the ceiling were cables and pulleys that held the horses' harness and gear. The horses, of course, were kept out back, and when the fire bell rang, the horses knew enough to come inside the firehouse and walk right into their harnesses. The firemen would hook them up and hook the fire engine up behind it, whether it was a steamer or a ladder truck, and away they would go. How many horses that were pulling the rig behind them was dependent upon how heavy the rig was. If it was a steamer, that was pretty heavy. But sometimes you just saw one horse, sometimes you saw two or three. I don't think I ever saw 4 horses pulling a rig, though. Here's a photograph taken in front of the firehouse, and here you see 3 horses hooked up to a pumper, which is kind of surprising. I didn't think a pumper would be that heavy. Of course, when the fire call was over with, they come back to the station, release the horses, and then they'd have to push the rig back into the firehouse. Like I said, the steamers were pretty heavy. Here we have 2 rigs in front of the firehouse, one a pumper and one a steamer. Now we have 3 horses hooked to the steamer, which makes sense because it's so heavy. And we have 2 horses hooked to the pumper. And the flowers are still blooming in the windows. In my previous videos on the different fire halls in Port Huron, I showed the video clips of how the steamer worked and how the hand pumpers worked as well. So when you get a chance, go back and check those out. It's pretty interesting. In this photograph here, you see the steamer already hooked up to the 3 horses. And this photograph was made into a postcard, which is shown right here. And the color kind of brings it out a little bit more. Here you see one of the steamers in action. This was the fire that burnt down the Howard Furniture Store. That was on Huron Avenue, just across the street from the courthouse. And in this photograph here, you can see they went high-tech. No longer the horse and rigs, but now we have a motorized truck. There was a transition period, however. There was many times where you would have the old steamer and they'd have, instead of the horses pulling it, they'd have the fire engine pulling it, which is the case here. This photograph was also made into a postcard. I got this photograph out of the newspaper, and the caption said that Captain Fred Cleaver was the one driving the truck, and it was taken before 1920. Eventually, the Port Huron Fire Department went to an all-motorized department, and here you can see station number 1 with their 3 vehicles, and there are no flower pots in the window. I hope they didn't die. Before we leave this area, I want to go back to this photograph here, but I don't want to look at the firehouse. I want to look at the building next to it. In the building next to it, we can see 7th Street side of the Metropole Hotel. And there was a business on the 7th Street side. Most of the business was on Lapeer. But this one was a drugstore, and it was owned by George Williamson. Later on, you can see it's still a drugstore, but it's now Mills Drugstore, owned by Burt Mills. All right, I guess that's all the damage we can do in this area. If you'll join me in my next video, and we'll mosey down 7th Street a little further to the south.